Yeah, we'll get started. So, hey everyone, I'm Branden Soroka, CEO of Forteck. And yeah, we just wanted to put together this live stream to chat about pile burning. Basically, right now is when most people are looking to get or think about getting started with pile burning. So we thought it would be a good time of the year to chat about pile burning. And yeah, on the live stream here today, we have two other Forteck staff and Riley, who set up the link for us. So Grant, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, you bet. My name's Grant. I'm the HR manager with Forteck. So I'm handling all the hiring of employees for this, as well as handling some of the subcontractors that we'll bring on as well.
Trevor?
Name's Trevor. I'm the fleet manager, look after the mechanical end of the equipment and also deliver and help out in the field when extra persons needed.
Right on. So yeah, for today, we were gonna plan to go over what is pile burning, why is it done, and we're gonna discuss pros and cons of snowmobiles versus ATVs, snow depths and weather conditions, safety, maybe just go into depth on some of the past experiences we had and different types of things, and then chat about our pile burning program and hiring and recruitment and different types of things that we do to be successful with our burning programs each year. And then some of the services that we offer. So yeah, to start off, we will discuss pile burning and when is it done and why is it done. So basically, I'm a RPFT in Alberta, so registered professional forest technologist with the College of AAF&P. And yeah, so I took my forestry schooling at NAIT, and since then I've been involved in pile burning. To date, I started burning piles at a younger age and consistently been burning piles year after year since then. So I have calculated it to be about 51,000 piles that I've personally burnt over the years, primarily in Alberta. I've done some in northeastern BC as well. So yeah, that's sort of my background on pile burning. To date, managed over 300,000 piles roughly of contracts in primarily Alberta and some in northeast BC. So yeah, so basically when you're logging, simple and easy way of explaining the need for pile burning is after logging, there's slash left in the block. So you need to do something with that slash for a few reasons. It can be hard for planters to go through, for wildlife to cross through, and another reason is also provides wildfire risk. So pretty much you stack the slash, so it'd be the tops of the trees, the branches, things like that, get stacked into the pile along the side of the road, and it leaves basically piles on both sides or one side of the in-block roads throughout the harvested areas. So basically, why is it done? It's done to promote promote the site. So after you burn it, it's better for planting in those specific spots, and then it reduces the slash and increases or decreases the fire hazard during fire season. So those are the main ones that I have that I've noticed as reasons why pile burning is done. So if we want to move into, I don't know if there's any questions on that, Riley. Will you be chiming in? I can't see any comments or anything.
Yeah, I'll keep you posted if we have any questions on the live stream there.
Okay, sounds great. So yeah, pros and cons of snowmobiles and ATVs and what we use. So probably we'll kind of have a chat here between me and Trevor, but we prefer to use the Ski-Doo Tundra 550s or something similar that would have pogo suspension. We burnt in the past with ATVs without pogo suspension on them. What we found was that the A-arms tend to get hooked on stumps and logs and things like that when you're trying to sled through the blocks. For quads, I don't know that there's any specific quad that stands out from the other. We use Honda 420s primarily just because it's what we chose to go with a few years ago for fleet quads. So we try to keep them all the same so that we can replace the parts on them. And if we have any that are getting wore out or whatever, we'll start parting them out. So those are the two kinds of machines that we use. I guess in regards to snow depths and things like that, if you start early in the season, depending on where you're at, if you're in the northern part of Alberta, for example, quite often, even if there's not a lot of snow in the start of the year, you're going to want to probably go towards a sled, because there's if you're going to be in areas where there's potentially not enough frost in the ground yet in your blocks, and you're going to start getting stuck a lot with the quads. I know we've had some situations where we've gone out 1st of November up to the 5th or 10th of November with quads, and just ended up getting stuck a lot getting stuck a lot in the mud that's not frozen yet. So my preference is always kind of use sleds earlier, and then once it freezes up, and if there's not enough, not too much snow, then you can go back to quads, or some people use quads right from start to finish, depending on where you're working. Once you get too much snow, then obviously you have no option but to pretty much go to snowmobile. So that's pretty much my experience with it. I would say in general, I would typically choose a snowmobile over quad any day, but I also have a lot of experience on a snowmobile, so I can figure out how to get around a lot better with, or in general, just get around good with them. But some people maybe with less experience on a sled might choose the ATV over, or the quad over a snowmobile. So I don't know, Trevor, if you had anything you want to touch on in regards to like, or any questions for me, or anything that you had in regards to ATV. And
No, I think like you touched on it quite a bit there, Branden. The biggest thing is it depends on your access. I mean, we have the availability of working with the quad or skidoos. It's not like we have to go rent anything. They're in our warehouse that we can pull out either one. Once we know the area we have a contract with, we can decide at that time whether we're going to use quads or skidoos. One thing with the quads is the plastic's not as streamlined as a skidoo, so you tend to get a lot more sticks and stuff, and generally you're burning in the winter, so the plastic's a little more brittle, and that's why the skidoos are generally a little bit better to go with and a little faster access than a quads.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Obviously pile burning, because you're going through rollback pretty much most of the day, depending on the client that you're working for. It is quite hard on equipment. So what's some of the kind of common things that you see coming back into the shop for equipment damages, or things needing maintained or replaced or maintenance, in general, the common ones?
With the quads, where your floorboards are, lots of times your fenders will separate from where the floorboards attach. So most of the quads I know have the safety pins or whatever that they're designed to break there rather than break the plastic. So, you know, you carry lots of spare pins to put back together, or let them flop until it's back to the shop for service. Sticks in the A-arms, rip and CV boots, again, because of the cold weather, the rubber is a little more brittle and easier to wreck than when it's warm. It's not as forgiving. Lots of sticks in the tires, like not in the tires, but in between the bead on the rim and the rubber, and you tend to get tire leakage, air leaks. With the skidoos, they're not quite as stable as what a quad is, so a lot of them are tipping, and we're seeing broken brake levers or windshields and bent handlebars. Sometimes with the skidoos, when they tip over, the propane bottle will fall out, and the handle will break off the hose, torch handle, if you're using the propane torches. It's pretty minor, the damage. It's just you have to stay on top of it and fix little things to make sure everything stays safe.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, thanks for that info, Trevor. Next thing I wanted to just touch about was snow depths. So yeah, one thing that I guess it kind of ties to safety, but snow depths would be dependent typically on our clients, but at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we're burning in safe conditions. So minimal wind, sufficient snow depths, and not super warm. So ideally below zero. Some clients have a requirement of definitely needing to be below zero, and no warming trend in the future. So those are basically some of the things that we look at to make sure that we're not going to start a forest fire. So moving into safety risks, some of the risks that I've noticed and that are quite common are obviously the risk of a forest fire is always there. I mentioned some of the things that we do to ensure that we're not going to have a forest fire. Rollback. So rollback is typically quite standardly used in Alberta, governmentally required in most cases to reduce erosion and sort of restrict access and things like that for harvested areas. So typically in blocks will mostly have 100% rollback from what I've seen in Alberta, and more and more a lot of the access roads will be rolled back too. So basically rollback is just taking some slash and some stumps and different types of debris that's at the edge of the block roads and just scattering it across the block and trying to reduce access and erosion potential. So more and more that that's becoming a common practice, and it definitely makes it harder for us, and I know it makes it hard for silviculture to get there as well, like tree planting and things like that. But I will say a lot of people have been working very hard in the forest industry of Alberta to combat any sort of safety risks associated with rollback by doing different types of things like getting approved for having ATV trails through their blocks and different types of stuff like that. So we've had some projects where there's 100% rollback, and you can but they leave an ATV trail so you can actually still quad through it or sled through it quite easily. So forest fires, rollback, isolated working, so working remotely away from other people, or choosing your own block within radio contact from another person. Quite often we work with two people in a block. Go ahead.
We should also mention, with these guys that are working isolated, we give everyone a personal GPS that you can relay information back and forth with. So it's not like you're working out by yourself. You always have a radio contact through GPS if need be, if we don't have cell service in the area, or if you're not working with a group of people close by.
Yeah, we typically have radio contact and have at least two people working in the same area, and then checking in through satellite devices, such as typically we use InReach. We've also used spots in the past and satellite phones, but right now we're primarily utilize InReaches. And then yeah, you typically be GPSing on your phone, or and have a charger pack for that, or on a older school GPS.
Just want to do a quick shout out. We got Carson Titford who commented on our thing. He's out in the field today in the Clearwater Forest area contracting for West Fraser. So thanks for tuning in, Carson.
Right. So yeah, that kind of went over rollback, forest fire risks, isolated working. So yeah, pick up road access. So yeah, when you're pile burning, you're going to be covering a lot of ground consistently. If you're working as a contractor, you'll be working in one area till you complete that area and then going to another area. So quite often you're driving roads that you haven't been down before every single day. So definitely one of the safety risks to bring up with pile burning would just be, traveling unknown roads in winter conditions. Driving is one of the main safety concerns that us as foresters run into. And so that's one that I wanted to address for sure as being a significant safety risk. So just making sure you have proper tires and ideally studded, and that you're driving defensively if you're on a road that needs kilometers called and doing stuff like that. So, hey, Brian. You got Brian Chinsky, Daryl Fedorovich. So tuning in, guys. Traveling in the dark, yeah. So typically in the winter, it's going to be dark in Alberta. So a lot of times you're traveling out in the dark, and you're in the morning in your vehicle and kind of unloading at first light and heading in, and then trying to be back to the pickup before dark, just to avoid any sort of chance of collision on your ATV. Obviously, there might be trying to finish a block at the end of the day or something, and it might not be super possible to be back before dark, but typically we would always try to be. And then, yeah, you typically driving back out with the vehicle in the dark as well. So dark's definitely a hazard. And then the cold, obviously we're in the winter, so typically you're gonna have all those things associated with working in cold weather is a potential concern out there. So slopes and mountainous areas, one thing we've seen in the past to be just issues and blocks with significant slopes. So trying to make sure you have people that can properly run the snowmobiles, or typically if you're in slope, you want to sled, but snowmobile or ATV and steep blocks, making sure that everyone's competent in those.
With all this safety risks that we mentioned, Brandon, we should also mention that we do have to carry insurance for fires and stuff, or like if we lose blocks of wood or equipment that are in the blocks. And that's something that's getting harder and harder to get, but our company Forteck does have insurance for that.
Yeah, for sure. We typically have either 2 or 5 million, up to 5 million firefighting insurance. And it's definitely getting harder to get from my understanding, and quite expensive as well. So because we do lots of pile burning, we get that insurance, and some others that it might not be worth them if they're not doing as much volume in the year. So that's one thing that stands us out potentially from other smaller competitors.
Hey, I got a question here. Carson wants to know, Branden, what percentage of mechanical extinguishing do we see behind our slash pile burning?
Mechanical extinguishing. Yeah, I would say that in general, central to northern Alberta, almost none. Very little. Like I'm talking like, depends what you call central Alberta, but I'm thinking like Whitecourt, Swan Hills north. Typically we're not going to see that very often. Usually the piles are lit, and for traditional forestry practice, the piles are lit and they burn until they go out, and then we're burning in safe burning conditions, so there's sufficient snow, not too much wind, and not too warm, and not a warming trend. So typically they would burn out over the course of 1 to a couple of days. If you're burning chipper piles or something like that, they might burn for potentially weeks. So there's definitely some risk there. I have seen along the eastern slopes different types of places where they're more prone to Chinooks. Some areas being 100% utilizing mechanical machinery behind them to extinguish the piles. I also know that if you're working on pipeline right-of-ways or outside of the traditional forestry pile burning practice, if you're working on pipeline right-of-ways or near community or things like that, you typically always have a machine there, or if you're building road right-of-ways, something like that, typically have an excavator sitting there that you would kind of push the pile in and make sure you get 100% burn, and that there's no chance of escape fire. We've been doing some fire smart programs as well for communities. So we've been involved with having equipment on standby, being able to maintain and monitor the fire and maybe less snow conditions or close to communities or making in areas where we need to get 100% burn, or there's chance of potential wildfire that we want to avoid.
Perfect. Thanks.
We never burn with, we try not to burn with the piles of logs in the blocks at all, right? Or equipment. We're generally the last one in the blocks before they put it right to bed.
Yeah, you know, in general, a company put in a policy a couple of years ago that we ideally don't burn any, at least specifically not without mill approval. If we can get mill approval and the conditions are okay, then we might burn in a block that has equipment or log decks in it. But in general, without approval and sufficient snow depth conditions of that would reduce the risk of any sort of, you know, sparks landing on a log deck or something. Yeah, typically we would never enter a block and burn in that block if there's log decks in the block or equipment in the block, and we let all of our crews know that. Like I said, there may be the odd situation where the mill staff may say, you know, there's 1.5 feet of snow and the button tops at the end of the block, and it's you guys can burn up to 100 meters away from it or something. Then yeah, maybe we'll do that. But our Forteck process is to not burn in any blocks with equipment or log decks in it without any sort of extensive approval process.
Perfect. Carson followed up by saying the client that he's working for does 100% mechanical extinguishing behind their lighting, so it's a little different than we do. Got another question from Jerome also, who's asking about when burning, are there kick-ins to do, or is it mainly light and go? And when you answer that, do you want to touch on our use of propane versus like drip torches and stuff?
Yeah, so just back to Carson, definitely there is places and some clients that we work for that do 100% mechanical extinguishing, and in certain areas, I think that's super beneficial if there's a chance of forest fire risk, and there's a way to mitigate it, then I think definitely do it. So yeah, I think it's kind of about the area and terrain that you're working in, the typical weather patterns. You know, there's a lot of factors that come into play when trying to make a decision of deciding on doing that or not. So yeah, definitely understand the reason for doing it in certain locations. The other one was yeah, what was the other question, Grant?
The one from Jerome asking, when burning, are there kick-ins to do, or is it mainly light and go?
Sure what he means by kick-ins, if you want to maybe clarify that, but if I had to guess, I would say he means maybe like stopping in, making sure that the piles are not escaping or something after you light them. I would say it depends on the conditions. You know, if it's deep snow depth and there's no super risk of a forest fire, then you're probably going to be lighting and going. Almost always we quad back through or snowmobile back through our burnt areas, either at the end of the day or the day after, or we typically always have a project manager that would be or our quality control guys that would be coming back through and making sure that we have quality. Or we put a process in place 2 years ago for Forteck to do 100% quality checks of our field staff for pile burning in most cases. So yeah, typically we'll always have someone going back through within a day or a few days after, just double checking that all the piles were burnt and that we didn't miss anything. If there was any that didn't go, then we would retry them, and we'd be making sure that the fires are, you know, getting extinguished and not burning into anywhere they shouldn't be. But yeah, if you have a day that, you know, maybe you got out there and you lit some piles and all of a sudden the wind picks up, which, you know, does happen. Piles can create their own wind, especially if you get lots of them, hundreds of them in a block, for example. Then yeah, you're going to want to, you know, stop burning if you feel conditions are unsafe, and monitor the piles and watch them and wait for conditions to improve, or wait for those piles to burn out and then stop burning until the weather gets more favorable. So
he followed up here asking, like basically he's asking about is you need to push the unburnt ends back in, like if it burns out, you know, how much of it needs to be burned before it's considered like passing a quality check.
Yeah, so that would be called pile consumption or pile consumption percentage. Those are kind of the two terms that we typically hear. Pile consumption is going to depend a lot on snow depths and stuff as well. If you get too much snow in the piles and they're kind of loosely stacked and not stacked really well from the operator, then there's a chance that the pile might go out and half of it might not burn. I would say in general, from what I've seen in contracts, like some of our contracts will have no requirement for that. So basically, if you light it and it burnt, 80% of it and it went out, then it is what it is. But we do have some contracts that we've done that might have like a 100% pile consumption would be like the very maximum. And then but quite often it's around 80%. So if you burnt a pile and it didn't, I see it all the time, like quite frankly, when I'm doing quality control checks on our crews and stuff, you're going back through and you might see a pile that's 60% burnt and 40% of it's still left there. When we're doing our quality, or when our QC program, which is typically done by a third-party auditor, such as myself or one of our managers or contractor, then we would, or the mill, then we would typically be relighting those piles when we go by them just to see if we can get the rest of it to burn. But in general, most of the clients don't have anything in their contracts about pile consumption percentage, but some of them do. So in general, what I've seen is 80% quite regularly. So
another question here from Daryl. He's asking about what our challenges are when burning in BC with the venting index. I know right now we're doing mostly Alberta burning, but do you want to talk about the difference between Alberta and BC maybe?
Yeah, I have a lot of experience with the BC venting conditions, and largely that's why we haven't been burning in BC for the last couple of years. So yeah, a few years back, we took on some burning and for a couple of years in a row in British Columbia. And, we found the venting conditions to be very hard to work around if you were going there strictly to burn brush piles. The only way that we were able to make it feasible for our crews was to have layout crews, other forestry crews that are capable and trained in pile burning, working in the area, and basically just when they got up in the morning, monitoring the venting conditions map, and when it was capable of being able to burn fires according to the map in the area that your blocks are at or your piles are at, then we would go burn those days. And then the other days we would just do layout. But like we had, when we were doing those contracts there, we had months where there was only like 2 days that we were able to actually like burn in 1 month. So it was very restricting in regards to getting the work completed. I do know there's a bunch of things that are going on with pile burning, and we're involved with some of that, as well as different types of initiatives to try to reduce pile burning or alter what they're doing with it. So finding alternative ways to utilize the fiber. Problem is a lot of times the trucking costs and the money you spend on trucking that fiber out is going to be more expensive than the volume of matter that you're going to get out of it. So but yeah, I don't know the exact, I'm not super experienced into the rationale as to why the venting's been put in place in BC. I think that there's a combination of multiple things that may include climate change and visibility of in valleys and things and on highways and stuff like that. So yeah, it's definitely restricting and we quite frankly stopped burning in BC just due to venting conditions.
Awesome. I got another question here if you want to tackle this one. Carson's asking, how much carryover pile inventory do you deal with due to poor weather conditions or operations close to the end of the burning season? Usually the summer or winter is pile inventory.
Carryover pile inventory. So I'm assuming he means like piles that we couldn't get to burn that maybe get moved into the next year. I don't know if he wants to clarify that, but if that's what he's meaning, our goal is always 100%, and we'll do the best we can to get to that point. When we do our quality checks, we are always aiming for that the second time that we pass through. But obviously there's going to be circumstances where that's not achievable. Quite regularly, you might end up with some bad stacked piles that have no fines in them and they're hard to get burnt. So our process for a company is to mark those piles. So we would typically GPS them and ideally plot a photo of them, and they would show up on our interactive map, which clients would have access to. And then they can view that map and see where those piles are, and maybe they want to go and try them themselves. Maybe they say, hey, there's too many, we want you to send your crew back in to go do it. Or maybe they just want to leave it until the next year and attempt it the following season. You know, if it's in January and they want to be done by, say, the end of January, and you get too much snow and there's 3.5 feet of snow and it's aspen pile that's buried in snow, there's no way that that's going to light that year unless you get a massive chinook. So sometimes the best practice is to potentially GPS, plot photo, mark those piles and return the next year. But you know, I would say, like, since we started doing our 100% QC program, having a manager or a third-party quality contractor or field supervisor of some sort going back through the blocks after the crews go through, we run into that less and less. Like, the only time that I think that we maybe have had some issues with that would be if the weather conditions got too warm or something and we weren't able to actually go back and do the QC. Or if it snowed too much. Those are kind of the two main contributing factors. But typically we would go back through every block and aim for 100%. So it'd be like our manager going through, double checking the crew's quality and putting in a little bit extra effort to try to get as close to 100 as we can. And if we can't, then we just GPS them and mark them and make it clearly identified and known as soon as possible.
Yeah, I think that's what he was looking for, you bet.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess the next kind of thing we wanted to go into is just kind of day in the life of pile burning and then hiring and recruitment. I guess before we go into that, we can maybe chat about burning methods. So, you know, there's typical methods that I've seen are typically either tiger torch or propane. Drip torch, which is traditionally something that forestry uses a lot, the government, like firefighters, but as well would be petro gel packs or some sort of combination of things like that. Typically, we, for the last 3+ or more years, have been gone to 100% tiger torches. Just due to safety primarily, and if you're burning a lot of aspen piles or something, we found it to work pretty decently. But yeah, we've pretty much tried them all over the years. I know some people have their preferences. I know some guys that like to do petro packs. What we found is it's a lot of containment of stuff, and when our crews are moving from town to town to town, and then you need an enclosed trailer for sure, and then you gotta make sure you have stuff secured properly and labeled properly, and there's a lot of logistical things that come into play, is where we found that utilizing a tiger torch propane bottle is quite simple. You get your propane bottle filled and you make sure your hoses are connected and it's not leaking or anything, and then pretty much just burn your piles. So yeah, I guess, Trevor, how did you find propane work last year? You were utilizing pretty much 100% propane on all the projects.
Yeah, I felt that it was very good because at the end of the day, you could go and you're usually wet. Your gloves are wet, your boots are wet, and you got to dry all that stuff off. So you're not at home, you're not in a garage or anything, you're staying in a hotel room. So you got to bring that stuff in. So if you're using diesel or petrogel, you get contaminated gloves and your clothing and whatnot, and it really stinks up the hotel room, you could say, and it doesn't dry out diesel, you know, if you get it on there. And same thing with these petrogels. I investigated into a little bit, and you got to mix it in a warm area. So you're bringing these chemicals into a hotel room to mix them to make these gel packs. And because of the quantity of piles we're burning in a crew, you have to have quite a large volume of it. So propane tanks are good. You generally have 20-pound propane bottle we strap on the back of a skidoo and a milk crate. And then you can have a spare one at your landing site where you start from, or you can pack 2 on the skidoo, and it would last all day. And you could burn 200 pounds pretty easy with 1 propane tank, starting them and going around. And they're easy to pack. Everyone has them in town where you can fill propane, and it went fairly well. I mean, you always carried a spare tiger torch and hoses for the propane. And it's something wrecks, it's easy enough to rig up another one.
Yeah, and then you just use strikers, right? We had a few issues with guys getting the strikers wet, and then they couldn't get the propane.
Yeah, I mean, we tried with the lighters, but the lighters would actually wear out because you're lighting so much during the day. Like, I mean, so we went to strikers. At least you had the reusable flints, and always carried a spare striker and also a backup lighter or 2 just to make sure you can finish the day. Like you said, the biggest thing is if you get wet during the day, it makes everything lighting a lot harder. Once you get one lit, you can always go and dry out your striker. It's hard to dry out a lighter because it probably melt. And once you had them going, you could always go back to a fire to warm up and dry your striker out, start your propane torch.
Yeah, I think when it gets really cold, we've had some issues with propane, like it just doesn't come out as good and it starts doing typical propane stuff. But usually usually it's at the point where it's kind of not super safe working conditions. So there comes a point where we'd be shutting down around similar time for cold, but there's a chance where you might have some issues with your propane kind of freezing up.
Yeah, I mean, propane don't gel off until 35 or 40 below, and if you're working that, it's pretty cold to be working. What I noticed in the colder weather is you wouldn't get as much, you couldn't utilize as much propane out of the bottle as what you could when it was warmer. It just kind of, you wouldn't have that pressure to light the torch as easy. It was just a lot slower of a burn out of your propane bottle than if it was warmer weather.
Where do you find that around, like 20, 25, somewhere in there?
Yeah, you can definitely notice the difference between -5 and -25 on how long a bottle would last.
Yeah, for sure. And so yeah, day in the life of pile burning. Typically, we explain this when we're doing our interviewing if they haven't burnt piles before. But basically, you get up in the morning and you'd have a plan from that you made the day before, which blocks you're gonna go to and stuff. Get up in the morning, do your typical morning stuff. Make sure you have lunch for the day, water, proper equipment, everything's dried. Radios, that you make sure you charge the radio the night before, get all your proper communication devices and everything, and that your machine's all in good working order. And yeah, you head out to the field. On average, I would say you probably drive anywhere from a half hour to an hour, sometimes hour and a half to get to the blocks. And then you unload, and you're usually going to sled anywhere or quad anywhere from, could be roadside, pretty close to roadside, to I've done some stuff like up north in the northern part of the province up to 40-kilometer sled rides. So changes a lot depending on where you're working, but basically what I usually try to do is kind of be unloading at first light, and you have pretty short daylight in the burning season, so pretty much try to work all daylight hours and then be back at the pickup for the end of the day, and then travel back in the pickup kind of before dark or at dark or after dark in the pickup, and then get back to your accommodations. We typically make sure you sync all your data and your that you captured for the day, so it's updated. Complete your reporting to as per our Forteck process to project manager, and then that would include like updating your timesheets and things like that. And then yeah, you'd have your supper and then have a few hours in the night and do it all over again day after day. It's kind of like farming, pile burning in a lot of ways. You're kind of make hay while the sun shines. So you're going to spend a lot of time of working when the weather is favorable, and taking your time off when the weather's not favorable. So if it's not going to be like a 5 and 2, you're going to be working according to the weather and obviously according to labor standards. But yeah, if it's going to be good burning for 10 days, and you're going to work those 10 days. And if it snows too much on day 10, you're going to wait till it get a Chinook, or if it gets too warm and you got to shut down, then you're going to wait till it snows more. We got a question here. How many piles are burned per day per person? Yeah, that's a great question. So, and that ties smoothly into transitioning kind of to our second last topic of the day, which is hiring and recruitment and working with Forteck. So, yeah, on average for employees, our expectation is minimum 100 piles a day. We find that if you are not getting that many piles in a day, then typically the company is not really making any money, and the employees not making much money either. Our standard rates typically range around $2 per pile if we're paying employees on a per pile basis. So so I would put them about $200 a day. High end, what you would expect is, I mean, my target when I go out every day is going to be 200 piles a day is my target. And it's achievable if you have good, decent blocks and things go according to plan, which they don't necessarily always do when you're burning piles. But yeah, so I would say range is between 100 to 200 and piles per day per guy. And quite often they're going to fall within the range of 150 to 170 piles a day, or 130 to 170 piles a day. So yeah, high end will be over 150 a day, and low end will be less than 150 a day.
One question I get asked a lot, Branden, is how big are these piles? Because people are kind of hearing, 150, 200 piles a day. It seems like a lot.
Yeah.
How big is the average pile?
Yeah, it changes by area. Up north, in the northern part of the province, I've seen some, piles that are smaller than a small car, and only between your waist and your shoulder high. And in northeastern BC, I've seen some piles that are typically a lot bigger. Like I've seen them the size of an average size house in town. So I would say the average size pile is typically going to be double the height of a person, and maybe trying to think how wide it would be, but so yeah, in meters it's going to be 6 to 10 meters, probably any direction, width and height, and they're going to be oblong shaped. So yeah, it really depends on the area though, and what you stack them with. So there's areas where you're going to have them stacked with button top or with a dozer, or so it changes quite a bit depending on what equipment you use, how scattered the slashes and the blocks, and a lot of different factors. But on average, you could say kind of the size of a large pickup, potentially bigger.
Perfect. Marty's also following up asking, on average, I know it's hard to say because it's always weather dependent, but on average, how many days of work do we expect crews to get in a month?
Yeah, that's a great question. Usually for our employees in general, we try to target to have them work around 20 days a month, which gives them 10 days off. That roughly works out to a 10 and 2, or a 5 and 2 and a 10 and 4. So that's kind of like our standard. But it's going to change year to year. We've had months where we've hired guys and they've gone to go to work, or wanted to go to work, or ready to go to work, and we never got snow for a month and a half. So they had no work for up to 2 months, and then all of a sudden they had 5 weeks of like, let's burn as much as we possibly can within labor laws. So it's 100% conditional on the weather and locations that you're working. The nice thing about working for Forteck is that we do have work scattered across the province of Alberta for burning. We've actually done some burning in northern Saskatchewan as well, and northeastern BC, but majority of our work is going to be in Alberta. So we have opportunity to start where the snow is, work around the conditions and stuff like that. So quite often we'll find ourselves starting kind of the first week in November, this year's been a bit different. We haven't had enough snow to really get started quite yet. But yeah, typically I like to try to start between the 1st and the 5th of November, and then pretty much work straight through until end of January. A lot of our clients in the north central parts of the provinces, we finish all their piles before Christmas. We have some sort of central south parts of the forested areas in the province, and quite often we don't have enough snow to start until Christmas or after Christmas. So the nice thing about working with us is we typically have enough work to keep you from November until the season ends, which sometimes can go into the middle of February with some extension of deadlines. So. So yeah, he's asking how many days off per month average. I would say that it kind of, yeah, like I mentioned that it depends on the weather, but if I had to guess, we could probably pull some of that information up, Grant, through past years, or we could start doing that going forward. But I don't know. I'm going to say on average that in general, they should be working 15 to 20 days a month, probably.
It's just gonna be hard to predict because
Yeah.
it's all about the weather. Could have worked more last year if the weather's better. Could have worked less last year if the weather's better this year. So it really depends. And Marty's also asking about the price fluctuating block to block. No, it's the same price. Every pile you do is $2 per pile, with a bonus potential at the end of the year. So if you average over 150 piles at the end of the year per day, then you're getting $225 per block. If you average over 200 piles per day, you're getting $250 per block, or per pile. Sorry.
Yeah, so that's right. We do keep the price the same, and if you're moving from area to area, it's typically going to balance out over the course of the year. But if you just come on for one project or something, then you might end up with either a good project or a bad project. But we should do the best that we can to try to, I guess, get the most productive areas and things like that. But obviously, sometimes that's out of our control. And if there is, we do have an approval process when you work for Forteck. So we have approvals at forteck.ca. It's an email, and basically, if there's anything that's outside of your scope of work, or if there's something that doesn't work for the rates that you're working for, and there's some rationale as to why, then 100% of the time you can send an email to approvals@forteck.ca, and between myself and our finance manager and the project manager that you'd be working under, we get back typically within a day. And very often, or almost always, requests for additional pay is approved, because there's definitely circumstances where maybe the access wasn't good that day and you couldn't get to your block or whatever. So then you get potentially a minimum day rate or a day rate of some sort. So yeah, there's lots of different things that we can work with. Or if you think that you need an increase in pay for a specific block area because and we've done this in the past, because you got to sled for a significant amount of area and it's scattered or something, then maybe that area gets done on a day rate. So yeah, there's, in general, Grant's 100% right. That's our pay. But as well, we also work with some single man consultants, contractors that help us out from time to time, assuming it's provable by our clients. And they sometimes will do it on a all-inclusive rate, which is the same way we get paid. It's typically by the hectare, by the meter cubed, or by the pile, are the three ways that we typically get paid as a company. We got a few more questions here. Any apps used for predicting weather and wind? Yeah, we actually have a list of websites that we use. I think we have like 4 or 5 of them now. I'll have to go and look exactly which ones they are, but I know that all of our project managers and field supervisors are 100% aware of what they are. I wish Victor was on here today, because he was the more hands-on manager with and Riley as well, with a bunch of our projects last year and going into this year. But I know that they had one specific program that they were using last year that worked really well. And then obviously, if you're in Northeast BC, you'd use the venting conditions But yeah, we use a combination of usually multiple weather stations, but I think they had a
I think
weather,
it's called
I think they had what, do you know, Trevor?
Windy app. WINDY.app is the one I was downloaded to look at.
Yeah, Carson might be replying or referring to, I know there's one that we specifically used for a few clients last year. It was really good in Alberta.
Yeah,
I'll have to look up
we
which ones.
utilize a few of them, try looking at the best, and, you know, just to get a better average and make sure we have a good indication what's going to be happening.
Yeah, I can definitely find out though if you want to direct message me, I can let you know some of the ones we use, or if you have any that you use, that feel free to type it in the chat. But yeah, we definitely have a list of ones that we typically use. I just got to pull it up, the exact websites. What else we got here? So yeah, those are most of the questions that we had. I guess if you want to know a statistic, my biggest day ever of piles was 428. I was quite young, like 18, I believe. And that was, you know, large block, lots of piles, and working outside of regular working hours. But yeah, anyway, that's the record that I know of, and I got it myself. But don't expect that. It's unheard of. So I do know some other guys that have come in 300-400s if you have optimal conditions. Some of the best days I think I had, and I think that was the day that I had that too, was after Chinook. So if you get a, you know, 2-3 feet of snow and you get a large Chinook, and then it gets really warm and everything freezes after, then you can cruise right on top of the snow with a sled, and you don't even notice any rollback at all. And you can just go like pile to pile to pile, and just kind of step off your sled, let the pile go to the next one. If all the snow is off of them, 100% melted off, and it's just fine sitting there. They just go up like crazy, and you don't have any rollback to deal with. You're just sledding on top of it all. So.
A quick question here from Jerome. He's asking if we have any chainsaw work related to pile burning.
For brush pile burning for forestry companies that we do as contractors, the only time you're going to be doing saw work typically is if you're going to be having to clear access. So you know, if there's typical access stuff. So if there's most likely, or most of the time, we're accessing the same way that they logged. So typically we're burning piles within a year after logging. So they would be, you know, they were accessible a year ago with logging trucks. So it's usually not going to be a lot. But sometimes on crossings, if they do bad rollback and stuff like that, you might have to, you know, cut a bunch of extra trees to get across the creek crossing or something. Or on the main access roads, there might just be, you know, some trees here and there. If there was a big wind throw event or a forest fire in the area that caused for a whole bunch of blowdown afterwards, then yeah, there might be a bunch of cutting trees for access purposes. If that happens, we ask that you typically document it with photo, GPS location, and time spent. And quite often, if it's anything significant, I mean, if you're just cutting a couple of trees out of the way, I mean, that's, and you're certified and capable of running this chainsaw according to our processes, then yeah, I mean, you just cut the trees out of the way. But if you're gonna have to spend a half a day or a full day clearing an area, if it's going to be a full day, ideally you burn the other areas first, identify that to us, and we'll ask for approval, maybe for a day rate to do that saw work. But it very rarely happens. It's a couple times a year. So so yeah, that would be our process. In regards to like having to buck up piles and stuff like that, only time I've ever seen us do that was when we were doing some mountain pine needle burning in harvested pine infected stands. So we were burning green piles right behind the logging, and there was a few cases where we used some chainsaws to buck stuff up and get the piles going. But in general, for forestry practices, it's too expensive and takes too long. So it's not going to be used almost ever.
Yeah, Branden, do you want to kind of give us one little more thing while we wrap this up here before we go into kind of Forteck's other stuff, and just talk about what is required in somebody coming onto this to be successful in doing pile burning as an employee or as a contractor?
Yeah, for sure. So things we look for is the first thing I look for is capable on a snowmobile and a quad. Typically all day you're going to be quadding or snowmobiling quite extensively through adverse conditions. So being able to get around on a quad and a sled is definitely an asset. And then bush knowledge, so understanding you know, simple navigations, making sure you're in the block on the map at the right place and all that kind of stuff. Survival skills, things like that. Just general bush knowledge is definitely an asset. And then next one that is just equally as important is understanding of fire. So fire behavior. We like to hire people that have fire backgrounds with extensive experience with wildfire behavior, because then they can understand safe burning conditions, non-safe burning conditions. If the conditions change and they're blocked, they're not going to go light a pile beside the bush with the wind blowing at the trees, kind of thing. So yeah, those are the three that we definitely look for. Also, if they have their own pickup and are willing to use it, and we can pay them to use their own truck, that saves us from having to buy another crew truck, then that's preferred as well. So I guess the one that I forgot that's equally as important is we also look for people that have forestry education and expertise. So foresters, forest techs, people with entry-level forestry schooling, or years of forestry experience, all of those types of things qualify. We've also had good luck with like trappers and guys that do hunting, like bush camps and things like that, that are just really, you know, knowledgeable and experienced with the forest. Mechanics is super beneficial too. You're typically going to have to know how to work on a quad or a sled, or be able to fix some things when needed, just to make sure that if, you know, something doesn't go as planned and your sled's not working very well, that you're able to troubleshoot or figure out how to get out of the bush. If you can't, that's why we have Trevor hired, because he's our equipment rescue guy. He'll come out there and fix it, or he'll figure out how to pull it out, or whatever we need to do to get the job done.
One quick comment on that. We did have a question that I wanted to kind of lead into it anyways. What are some like recommendations for gear to have when you're out there? I think you touched on it a little bit earlier, Trevor, but do you want to talk about like what kind of gear we expect employees to have?
Yeah, so I guess it would be whatever's in our equipment or our employment agreement, Grant. I believe it's clearly outlined in there. I'd have to pull it up to go through that to get exactly what's required. That would be given to you in your offer. But just off the top of my head, obviously you're going to need your proper bush gear. Make sure that you have like warm clothing for the bush, any required PPE that may be necessary. We supply some like the sparkers and stuff like that, propane bottles and tire torches, and typically most of the equipment, including the ATVs, snowmobiles and stuff, would be supplied for employees. If you're a contractor, obviously they would be looking after that, but yeah, for employees we would typically supply most things. They would be required to have a phone and charger pack as a backup for safety and navigation. And then, yeah, just regular kind of bush gear. So one thing I wanted to get into, if we're getting closer to wrapping up here, is basically, I guess, opportunities for working with us or hiring us is we hire employees to do pile burning seasonally. It runs from November 1st to end of January, typically, sometimes into February. We went over all the rates and terms and stuff like that. So definitely, if you're interested in working with us, you can email a resume and some references to careers@forteck.ca. And then in regards to clients, the one thing that I wanted to state for our list of services is basically pile burning. So we're here to burn piles for you. If you have a pile burning program that you need done, we can give you an estimate on it. If you have some files or if you have standard rates that you usually work off of, we'll do our best to make sure that we can get that job done for you. One thing that stands out for us is our 100% QC program that we implement with every client unless otherwise discussed. So that's substantial. We also have a lot of staff and equipment so we can get large jobs done. We're centrally located across the province. So we have location north of Edmonton, Morinville. I'm up in Manning by Peace River. We have management staff in Drayton Valley, and we have employees localized to a lot of areas in the province. So those are some of the benefits. We also have we're also core certified, have a very strong safety plan. We have a safety full-time or part-time manager that basically makes sure that all of our safety is being completed all the time and it's up to standards, and we're consistently updating processes and things like that, and crews are filling out reports. We have Trevor that does all the fleet maintenance and ensures that we have 100% maintenance of all equipment throughout the course of the year. And if stuff's broken down, he rescues it. He just basically, his job is to make sure that everything is in proper working condition at all times. And so yeah, those are some of the things that we have that will stand us out from competitors. Some of the other stuff that we can do as well, if you're interested in additional services, would be we have a joint venture, the helicopter company, where we can do scanning of the piles in the spring. So if you have an interest in that, typically it's going to be between $1,600 to $1,800 an hour. We're also working on building out the drone program for last year. We did some drone stuff in regards to imagery after we burn. So being able to go and provide imagery of the blocks. So be able to scan the blocks when we're doing our quality control program, and provide that imagery if required to the client, and can give them a really good update visual of the work that's been completed. So that's something you're interested in, we can do that, as well as we're working on setting up a infrared for scanning for piles through drones. So rather than paying the $1,800 for a helicopter, potentially we can utilize our internal drone services and scan for hot spots and things like that behind the machinery. So that's something that we're actively working on, and we're eager in pursuing, and we have staffing and drone capabilities to achieve that. So it's something that we're looking at starting this year and going into the future. So that's pretty much it. If you're interested in working with us, email careers@forteck.ca. If you're interested in having us burn piles, complete scanning of piles with helicopter or drone, or any of our other large array of forestry services, then you can contact me direct at 780. Actually, it's right behind you there. 780-836-6083. You can email info@forteck.ca. You can also email me. It's just Branden, BRANDEN.Soroka, SOROKA, @forteck.ca, and I do my best to get back to everybody as quickly as possible. Open to providing quotes and things like that on jobs. We bid, do whatever you guys need done. Just let us know and we'll do our best to do it. Our company mission is to provide top-notch services to the forestry environmental sectors of Western Canada. So we currently operate in Alberta, BC, and Saskatchewan, and anything that falls within the scope of forestry and environmental, we're interested in pursuing, assuming that we have the proper resources and are able to do a high-quality job of it if we decide to do it. So that pretty much concludes our conversation. If there's anything else that anyone had any questions that we didn't address, let me know. You guys have our contact info now, so you can always email me direct. If you're interested in having a recording of this, I believe it'll be posted on YouTube and potentially a few other places. So if you want to, you can you can message your email in the chat, or message it into directly to our Facebook Forteck page, and we can send you a recording of it if you link to the YouTube video or whatever. If you want to share it with anyone else, or if you have any other friends that are interested in possibly understanding more about cloud burning. So appreciate you all for your time, and yeah, we'll close off the live chat.
Thanks, everybody.